Hello, welcome to Empower and Ignite Transformation Podcast with Alicia and Nicole. How are you, Alicia?
I am doing good today. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well this evening. I definitely am doing okay today. Yeah, and I want to say to our viewers that we just want you to not only like but subscribe and share our channel. I always forget to say that at the beginning. So I want to make sure that I get that in. So your day's going good?
So my day is going good. I cannot complain. I think it was a busy, productive day. So, those days are always a good day, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Same here, same here. So we're gonna just dive on in. I'm excited about today's topic because, of course, we do this all the time in our profession.
Mhm.
But it is where it can be challenging for others. So today's topic is related to effective communication, communication styles, and how to communicate effectively. So, this topic I'm really excited about having.
Yeah, I think it's important to have this topic. We're still at the top of the year, right? And then I just think that it's now a good time to practice that proper communication when you're talking to anyone that's at work, with families and relationships, is knowing how to have that proper dialogue where we are, focused on the problem and not attacking each other in this communication, regarding whatever the issue is.
Yeah, definitely that. And even when people are thinking about them communicating with others, so often people may think that they're communicating effectively just because they verbally said something, right? They
Mhm.
think that, oh, well, I said what I needed to say, and so
Mhm.
then that was me communicating effectively, when in reality is so much more than verbal communication. It's so much more than you just saying something and dialogue back and forth. It really is, if the other person doesn't understand you, then you're not communicating effectively. You
Right.
want to ensure that that person is understanding what it is that you are relaying.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think you made some good points there because it's the knowing how the what you are saying is being delivered. What choice of words are you choosing? How is it being interpreted? Is it the message that is meant to get across? Because sometimes we can say things and it's like we didn't mean to say it in that tone, right? And there we go with that nonverbal communication because those nonverbal cues is what really can turn a conversation around when we have the neck rolling or we got the turning your back on, the person or you looking the opposite direction. It breaks down the communication already and those are just nonverbal ways. So there's so many ways that we can break a conversation down by just not using that proper communication.
Definitely, when body language is a form of communication for people and they're watching your body language. So it's not always what you say, but it is in the behavior that you present when communicating. And when you said tone, that's very important because if you are using a tone that is loud, aggressive, then the person, that's not effective communication for sure. But then also, the person may not be able to receive what it is that you're really trying to convey because they're watching your body language and all they hear is loudness.
Right, right. A tone can really just turn a conversation so bad, so bad. And it's just the high pitch or, the shutdown, right? And that's where we usually have that communication breakdown is the shutdown of I'm trying to express myself emotionally. I'm trying to be vulnerable, but I feel like I can't be. I feel like I'm misunderstood. And then the shutdown of, now I don't want to talk anymore. Now I don't want to, have those type of conversations because of feeling as if you are not really truly understanding when it's more of okay knowing if you're not truly understanding I need to deliver it and watch how I'm delivering it to make sure that you can kind of understand what I'm trying to deliver to you, right?
Right. Yeah. So I always suggest with clients and anyone else, like ask yourself, what is my intent for having this conversation,
Mhm.
right? So when you're clear on your intent, what is it that you expect to get from the conversation? What are you wanting to get out of the conversation? Why are you saying what you're saying? Then you can lead with that. You also can even tell the person you're in conversation with that my intent for this conversation is this, and this, right? I'm hoping that we can have a resolution to whatever the issue may be, or just an understanding, right? I also know when I'm talking to someone and they're saying that expressed myself or told someone this or that, to ask them that just because you said something to someone doesn't mean that they understood it in the way that you were wanting them to. So, beyond the intent, sometimes you really got to ask people, can you reiterate what it is that I said?
Right.
Hmm.
And why do we feel so intimidated or upset when people ask us to repeat ourselves, or can you just say that again, or I don't understand? No, those are leading uh, to tell you that that communication didn't work for me. So we have to know that the communication needs to work on how it's delivered, how it's perceived, and we have to get the takeaway. So when we set that intention, is the intent for reconnecting, is the intent for understanding, is the intent for looking for an apology? What is your intent? What are you hoping to gain? And so a lot of times too, right, we see people who their intent is to say what they need to say, but what they need to say is just hurting the other person without a goal in mind. So
Hmm.
your intent is not a good intent for a proper, effective communication, because we can't, start off with just attacking, wanting to attack in the communication. We want to make sure that we are, using that proper way where we are taking the time, really hearing each other's point of views.
Yeah, definitely that. And even going back with the understanding of why you're having the conversation and being able to ask the person, can you reiterate what it is that I said? And that's not to be sarcastic, but it really is you want to ensure that they have an understanding.
Hmm.
So you both are on the same page so that there's clarity there. And so that's why you ask that question, is not to belittle someone or make them feel as if you don't believe that they heard what you said. It really is for understanding, and so you two can resolve or address whatever it is that needs to be addressed. But also in communication, you can think that a person knows your expectations, right? So often people are thinking that someone else knows what they're expecting of them. And so then they're thinking the person is a mind reader. And it really requires you to say what it is that you have as an expectation of the other person. And that
Mhm.
can be in any relationship, right? So not just intimate relationship, but platonic friendships. It could be in family dynamic relationships, but then also in the workplace. If you are a colleague, if you are a supervisor, you have expectations, and you need to be clear in communicating those to your subordinate staff, or if you are working on a team, on a team, you communicate effectively by being clear in stating what the expectations are for everyone, what assignments is necessary, and how is it delegated so that you could reach the goal. So I
Right.
think it's really key for people to not just think that people know,
Mhm.
don't make an assumption, but really talk and communicate in saying what it is that you expect so that person is aware.
Right, right. And then we also have to take into consideration that everyone have these different communication styles. And we want to make sure that we are practicing these healthy communication styles. And so like we want to make sure like even in general that we're not being passive when we have those communication. And so, we see a lot of people who, avoid the eye contact, right? Or, avoid any contact. That's how they are being passive. They're just going to ignore the situation to hope that it go away versus communicating effectively. Or, the people who suppresses their feelings, that's still a passive way of communicating. I'm just going to hold it in because I don't want to have this hard talk with, the person that offended me, or, how I feel. I don't want to have that. So I'm just going to, kind of let it sweep it under the rug, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So definitely not wanting to have a style of communication, but also not wanting to have an aggressive style of communication, right? Not being the bully or not listening, not being harsh, um, intimidating. Really, to effectively communicate, you need to have an assertive communication style.
Yes, yes. And so
Yeah.
I think that's so important to know because a lot of people, they're like, they feel that if they bottle it in or hold it in, or if they don't say anything, or if they just, I'm choosing my battles, well, all those things can build up resentment. All those things can build up frustration that can really cause, even more of a bad communication once it's time to literally communicate, because sooner or later, the communication has to happen if these people are in your life. At work, you have no choice but to communicate with the coworkers. So you just want to make sure that you are doing it properly. So yes, so when we say that we want to make sure that we are practicing that assertive communication, we definitely want to make sure that we are using clear examples, clear expressions to make sure that our feelings and our emotions is really being, put out there. And then we also have to remember too that emotional regulation of our emotions is our responsibility. And that's hard for a lot of people. It's so hard for people to, take in that the way that I feel, I am responsible for that. So I can't sit there and push it off on you. It's your fault that my feelings is hurt because you. No, no. I have to put a boundary there, and I have to make sure that I'm expressing myself in a way that is more of direct, in the sense of saying you cannot put this on me by saying it's my take responsibility for your actions as well, right? And so
Yeah.
that's a big part of making sure that we are practicing that, good communication with each other.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing you say as it relates to the assertive communication style, really just being clear and stating what your needs and wants are.
Mhm.
Like definitely making that clear, but then also making direct eye contact when you're communicating with someone. Um, and even in that, also the tone, right? Removing the emotions from it because you do have to regulate your own emotions. I heard you say that. Like you have to, it's not someone's obligation. And I'm not saying that you can't be in a relationship and the person doesn't care about your emotions. That's not what I'm saying. So, but I'm saying that it is your responsibility because they're your emotions and you started to feel and have these emotions from whatever it was that you experienced. But in assertive communication, it's going back to the communication piece and not blurring all of the emotions and feelings into it, but just really how am I communicating with my person or the person that I need to communicate with so that I'm really expressing the needs and wants that I have.
Yeah, yeah. Imagine being at work and all of a sudden, a coworker says something that offends me, and so my first emotion is anger and I lash out. Imagine that. Imagine how that will look. Imagine what bosses would say just in general, right? Not only did I lose my temper in the workplace, I didn't use the proper communication to even tell the person, like, you won. Let's have this conversation. I didn't do the right chain of command and took it up. I just lashed out in the workplace. Imagine how bad that will make me look because I couldn't control my emotions. I
Yeah.
can't blame that person. It's
And then
your fault.
yeah,
That's not how that.
definitely. And it goes back to when you said, "Oh, I become angry and explosive." So it goes back to tone. So now
Mhm.
you're aggressive in your communication with that person because that person has made you feel a certain way.
Right.
Um, and versus, okay, so I need to be able to communicate effectively. And in assertive communication, it is where you would lead with respect, but
Mhm.
also communicate the expectation that you would receive respect.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Mhm.
Because we all want to be respected. No one wants to enter a conversation knowing that someone is going to belittle them any type of way, ignore them, or not acknowledge their feelings, right? We all want our feelings to be acknowledged to a certain point. And so that's where, I always, tell people practice those I statements. How do I feel? Make sure you focus in on I versus you focusing on them because you can't change the other person, you change yourself.
Mhm.
Focus on them I statements. And that's so big because we get stuck on the you never listen or I always do X, Y, and Z. And then, you know, we feel like we close down because what do you mean? I never, like, never, like, people get stuck on that one word and now the communication is spiraling out of control based off of just the one word of you never or I always or, things of that. So it's always important to, versus you saying you never listen, do something more calmly in a sense of, I feel unheard
Mhm.
when you
Right.
make sure you're still putting that back on how I feel based on how you are want to express yourself versus the you never because
Yeah.
let's be honest, never is such a hard word for a lot of people to hear.
So I hear you saying, okay, so the choice of wording and ensuring that you're saying it um correctly, but also if you don't, because you're human, then really going back to intent, when you're clear on why you're having a conversation, you're likely going to lead with I statements.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
likely going to say specifically, going back to the assertive communication style, your needs and wants.
Right. And being direct about it. Being
Mm-hmm.
direct. Don't be passive saying, oh, I wish I had a friend who calls me every day. Like, no, don't let's not do that. Let's let's be direct and say, I would like, I will feel important. It would make me feel more special if you call me every day. Like we could change the wording of this and think about
Right.
how much more that can be perceived. Like, even if I heard that, that sounds better than, oh, I wish you would just do it. It's just the
Mm-hmm.
passive aggressiveness to it,
Right.
and that's where people shuts down. So that's why it's so important to make sure you being direct and you
Mhm.
choosing those right choice of words. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely that. And then too, because people have all been raised differently. Even if it's siblings, even if you've been raised in the same household, you may not always communicate the same, right? Definitely because you're an individual, but also you are likely modeling some behavior of how you were taught to communicate. And every household was not taught how to effectively communicate. Some households did not communicate or address.
No.
Things were brushed under the rug, or you didn't address it and you just like let things go, and then all of a sudden now we back talking to each other.
Mhm.
So you don't know how to address because oftentimes, unfortunately, people think that when you address something, it's going to cause conflict, as if conflict is a negative all
Mhm.
the time, and it's not.
Yes. Open conversation is never a bad thing. And I think that's where we really get stuck because like you said, you think it's gonna cause conflict. So you're not open with the conversation. You just like, let me, tiptoe around it because you're trying to avoid, or you go in and you don't go in with good intentions. You set that intentions to attack versus the intentions to hearing out the other person's side. And so because as you said, many households haven't been, understanding the effective communication or even know the emotional, right? How to talk with their emotions and to do it properly or express their emotions, should I say,
Okay.
properly. Yeah. So, things of that nature. If you need a moment, take a moment. That is the best way not to lash out at anger. 90 seconds, that's all it takes. 90 seconds, and you can literally process things, and your mind can come back to calming you down if you just walk away for 90 seconds versus if you just react in that first second. You may say something you regret, the tone is off, the choice of words could be just totally wrong. Just give it 90 seconds sometimes, and 90 seconds can change a lot.
Definitely. I like that. Like give a pause, right? I always suggest to clients that if it is where you notice the conversation is escalating, that you can table conversations. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you would do that all the time, especially certain circumstances you can't table in a workplace, right? You can, but you really want to if you are depending on the position you're in, you want to address things head on and not come back to it. You want to be able to have those crucial, I call them crucial conversations. And so then you wouldn't necessarily table, but you would lead with intent. If it was in the workplace and you are a supervisor or even on a team assignment, you have to be able to communicate effectively. But if you're in a personal relationship, if it is whether it's intimate or platonic, and you start to notice that the conversation is escalating in the negative,
Mhm.
you want to be able to table that. It's okay. We're gonna come back to it. Now we're not gonna not come back to it. But sometimes it is where people emotions start to shift, and they may also not know how to respond in a respectful way, and so they need to be able to know themselves and know when that is needed.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is so important. And it's also so important, right? Because when we talk about proper communication, effective, if I see that the person need a moment, it's not for me to keep pushing
Mhm.
and pushing and pushing. Proper communication is they ask for a minute. They ask for 10 minutes to calm down. I'm going to give them the 10 minutes to calm down. I'm not going to sit there and just be like, come on, let's talk now. Let's talk now. I want to have this conversation now. No, they ask for that moment. You have to respect that boundary and give them that moment. And that is important as well.
Versus being aggressive and pushing and bullying or forcing a conversation to happen.
Right.
So that's so important. I'm so glad you said that. In allowing someone the time, and everybody does not process the same. So sometimes, even in having a conversation, it can be where that person is processing what was said, and it may be you are thinking, okay, we're in the clear. This will never come up again. But then they want to have the conversation a week later because they were processing the thoughts, and the thoughts are not, there is some unresolved. So
Right.
they are like, hey, can we talk about this again?
Yeah.
That's okay because everybody is not going to process the same. But remember, if they go back to the intent of why they're having a conversation, if it is that they're seeking a resolution, they both need to be able to say that whether or not they feel it was resolved on both ends, what that resolution was for them both.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. But then being open to if the conversation needs to come up about something that some thoughts that might have came from that conversation, being okay with having it again, not being scared to communicate.
Mhm. And
That's
then, because we get some conversations, right? And it's like we're still having the same conversation, the same conversation, the same conversation, and we're not getting to the bottom. We're not finding that resolution. When we get to those walls, right? Them brick walls where we're stuck having the same thing over and over, we need to revisit that intent.
Mhm.
What is the intent of this conversation? What are we looking and what are we hoping to gain? It's okay for the other person to also say, I feel we're hitting a brick wall because we're having the same conversation over and over again. So the same way you're ready to express yourself by having that conversation and then going back and thinking on it and bringing it back, they have the right to come to you at the same notion to say, we're doing this again. So we have to revisit, what is the intent? Are we trying to look for a resolution?
Yes.
Because the brick wall is gonna stay there unless
Yeah.
we have that proper communication where we both hear each other out, listening and fully understanding each other, and
Yeah.
it's so important, so important.
Definitely. But leading with what I hear is leading with integrity. Because if
Yeah,
you say that it is resolved, that my intent for this conversation is this and this, or, a resolution to this, and you both come up with the resolution, it wouldn't be where you keep coming back with that same issue
right, right.
unless you didn't likely lead with the honesty of what you really were seeking from the conversation.
Mm, and that's a whole 'nother type of subject there. So yes, I think the conversation and having effective communication and making sure that we talk to our family, our friends, like we always hit on, making sure you check in with others, communicate, reach out to others, check in on how they're feeling. If you notice there's an issue, don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to address it. It's okay. It's okay for you to have emotions. A lot of people don't believe that, but yes, it's definitely okay for you to have emotions. It's okay for you to express your emotions. You
Mhm.
just have to express them properly, and that's it.
Yes,
That's
and I was
that's
going to say validate yourself, validate your emotions.
that's a big
They
one.
matter. So definitely, even if someone isn't validating for you, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really big one. I think that's a really big one because we wait for others to do that validation,
Mhm.
and sometimes you have to validate your emotions because your emotions is how you feel, and it's okay to acknowledge it because that is the truth on.
Right, and you might not get it from somebody else. So definitely it is important that you validate yourself. It's
Yeah,
not an option because those are your true feelings.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you're entitled to feel how you feel. So definitely you got to just get to the root of why you feel the way that you feel.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think this was really a good subject. I think it was really a good subject to hit on. I think that especially top of the year, we're still there. We're, still in February. We still have time to make those changes. We still have time to, okay, when I go into work, I'm going to set the intention and have this conversation, this tough conversation with my coworker, this tough conversation with my uncle, aunt, boyfriend, girlfriend,
Right.
friend. We're going to have those conversations and we're going to set our intentions. We're going to watch our wording. We're going to watch for those nonverbal cues. And
Yeah,
we're going to do
body
this.
language is important. And then we're going to also work on just really the effective communication style would be assertive. And so, like, definitely starting to implement if you have found yourself not utilizing that style of communication, that will be the effective style of communication. So, definitely doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely take the time to look it up more, do some research, and make sure that you're practicing proper communication. All right.
Okay, so
So don't
on
forget
that
to,
note, we want to end off with we want you to share, subscribe, and like.
yes, please
Alrighty.
don't forget to send in new topics each and every week, okay?